There's a lot of military veterans that are into preparedness. I think it's just part of their training as well, that they try to be as well versed for various situations as possible. And so when they reintegrate into society and they become a veteran from their active duty, it's very easy, I think, for a lot of them to be in a prepper mindset. And a lot of preppers, though, that have not been in the military sometimes look at veterans as a threat. And I'm not one of those. I think that just like with any organization, there's bad apples. But to think that, your neighbor that's a veteran is going to be a threat to you by default because they are a veteran is ridiculous, just because some kind of catastrophe happens in your area. Not all veterans did bad things in the military as well. There's this idea that, you go in the military and you become a cold-hearted killer. And I don't think that's really true. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of good people that go in the military, and there's still a lot of good people that come out of the military. And once again, there's always bad apples. But if you consider that most veterans in society are going to be a major threat to you, I think you've got, a lot more problems at hand, because what about gangbangers, just gang members that are in larger cities? I think they're going to be a big problem. And you have big roving gangs going through neighborhoods, taking various types of material goods, at force. What about those that are addicted to various drugs or have other types of addictions? I think they're going to be very desperate, and they're going to be a threat when society is having problems and infrastructure is not in place to get their fix. I think there's so many other aspects, even including the common criminal in your neighborhood. They're going to be probably more of an issue than the possibility of a veteran doing something against you. There are some rogue groups of people that have, come out of the military that have warped minds. This is, a fact. But once again, you find this all different parts of society. Veterans, though, are sometimes, I think, stereotyped because you hear a lot about PTSD or acute stress problems or brain injuries or various types of amputations. And, some people just default with the idea that, they're dangerous people. There's a lot of mentally ill veterans out there. And I don't think that's so true. I think there's a lot of civilians out there that are mentally ill, if you ask me, more so than veterans. Just because someone's had problems with dealing with traumatic, events doesn't make them a threat to you. They just might be a threat to themselves. Look at the suicide rate within the military, and then even outside of the military within the veterans. It's not very good. So I think that there are situations, there has been for a fact, that people in the military have done things that they were not proud of. And when they get out of the military, they have a hard time coping with that. Mainly, I think they have a hard time forgiving themselves. And so some of the veterans go to various types of means of coping, including drugs and so forth. And those are the people that I do have some concern about. But once again, I don't think that represents the whole group, by any means. When we also talk about the military, we have to look at a lot of the politics within military types of actions. And that's the major problem. If you want to ask me about military, I think that some of the things in the past that have been, that have been done because of the politics at the current time is really the main issue for me. I think a lot of the conflicts and wars that we've had is not justified at all. Do you think that the Korean wars, do you think that, the Vietnam conflict, do you think that even some of the world wars were completely justified? I think that some of them are not, and it should be for obvious freaking reasons. Look at the war on drugs or even the war on terror that's been more recent. It's ridiculous. These types of conflicts that are put in front of the populace. Some of these are kind of like chasing a ghost, or chasing your own shadow. that, can you ever really win a war against drugs? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Can you ever really destroy and get rid of all terror in the world? I mean, that's just not winnable. If you ever researched documentaries and stuff on various types of collapses of societies, or even just breakdowns, in a temporary sense within society, it could be riots and so forth. I mean, there's a point that, police forces, military forces leave an area and just let it dissolve and let it, or, even let it just kind of chill out, because sometimes it causes more problems than not for them to be there. I mean, I've known of even situations that, even in recent times, that a street or even part of a town just goes chaotic. They had just riot and they're just burning down their own infrastructure. And the police just step back and they're just like, hey, we're not going to get involved very much because this is just out of hand. What are you going to do? Just start shooting everybody, or just, what are you going to do? When you have literally hundreds, if not thousands of civilians just going crazy. And, that's what I kind of have the most concern about, is people that are just unprepared. Unprepared citizens really are really dangerous people, because they're going to be so desperate and they're going to be doing a lot of things out of fear and, once again, desperation, just like a lot of addicts. They're going to be trying to find their fix, and when they can't get their fix, they're just going to do whatever they have to do to get their fix. And then you have, gangs, big roving gangs in larger cities in particular, that are going to be, taking advantage of the lack of various types of law enforcement, the safety nets in society. And so those are bigger concerns for me than some kind of individual that has been previously in a military, that, just happens to be a veteran now. We have so many people in society that have problems. And so, just to say that it's all about, the veterans, they're the threat, I think it's ridiculous. And, if you're going to have a plan of safety and security, it needs to involve everything, So, just as if you're one of those people that just, have made up their mind and said, no, I think that veterans are all a threat to me. Well, that's your business. But don't forget the other groups of people, make a plan to include everyone. Because if you don't, you're just kind of lying to yourself. You're making your own reality that's not based on anything. So that's all I have to say with that. I've had some requests to talk about veterans. My experience with veterans have been positive. Yes, I do know a few people that have had some mental fallout just from the things that they've seen and done in the military. I really do feel for them, and it's a difficult thing to go through for some people. Of course, some situations are worse than others. And it's something that I'm really personally glad that I didn't go into the military. I considered it, but I can tell you though that some people just don't deal with stress and trauma as other people do. We all have different coping mechanisms, and I kind of question if I would do very well if I saw a lot of death, and destruction. And so some people just aren't built to be in those situations. And I think that most people are just not meant to be in a war zone. I mean, let's just be honest, it's an artificial environment that's just really, it's a negative situation to be in. And so I do respect the military as a whole, but, that doesn't mean that we have to like everything that the military does. And I think that for the most part, it's a lot of politics that, that end up doing the influencing that leads to things that are really not in the best interest of people. And I wish that we had a better look at the history, of military conflicts. And I wish that more people had more knowledge of how things went down, because there's just so much needless death has happened, and that continue to happen. So much needless suffering. And I think that, to add to that list, I think that, even people in great power, certain politicians and so forth, could also be a great type of source of threat. if we had a real SHTF situation. So I think that the average veteran out there is not the problem. I think that we need to look around a little further. And for those trying to stir up a little bit of, the veterans out there, they're all deadly war machines. I don't think that you know what you're talking about. Yes, some of them know a lot of stuff about how to hurt people and how to kill people and how to create destruction, but a lot of them are all about peace now. A lot of them, never had the intentions to do anything to hurt anybody. It was only to secure our liberty and freedom as people. But sometimes they were misused, and it's sad to see good people hurt, but that doesn't mean that they're a threat to anyone. There are so many veterans that are integrated into our society, and there's multiple generations of veterans to say that at the very least. There's veterans that are fathers and mothers that are actively raising a family, that are doctors, that are police officers, that are firefighters, that are in many different roles of leadership. And so, I think that we need to really focus a lot more on, real threats out there, and not just this wishful thinking that, veterans are the end all and be all of threats when it comes to SHTF situations.